What's up you guys, welcome back to another top 10 commander video. This time I would like to go over my picks for the top 10 commanders who really just fell off the face of the earth. And I'm not talking about just commanders that never really saw play, never really got popular. I'm talking about commanders that had a lot of potential, people recognized them at the very beginning, and then they just sort of fell off. Or commanders that have been popular for a short period of time, or commanders that were really popular for a while, and then just out of nowhere they stopped seeing play. But before I get started, first I would like to remind you that most of you who are watching are not actually subscribed to the channel, so please hit that subscribe button, it does help me out here. Thank you all so much, we are past 21,000. Number 10 here is Zedru the Great-Hearted. I think it goes without saying for a lot of these commanders there is some sort of gimmick involved here that makes them attractive to players at first, and Zedru's gimmick was being able to give your opponents cards that are not really useful. Cards that actually hurt them even. Cards that prevent them from playing lands, prevent them from playing creatures, all while allowing you to gain life and draw cards. That's why Zedru was popular, however, that is very specific. There are not going to be too many cards like that that come out where they're just bad. Zedru really took advantage of some of the worst cards ever made, because the only way those cards could ever be considered good is if you have an ability that gives them to another player. That's it. And those cards are not very common. So that, in addition to the fact that we've just had so many newer commander options, even more interesting ones, a lot of commander products since 2011, and it's easy to understand why Zedru sort of fell off the face of the earth. Number 9 here is Zancha Sleeper Agent, another gimmick-focused commander here. I guess most commanders we could say have their gimmicks, but some definitely age better than others. And Zancha's whole gimmick is, again, giving your opponent a card that doesn't really help them out whatsoever. They do have a creature they can attack with, but the ability that anyone can funnel their mana into that allows you to draw a card and that player loses life is a big reason why Zancha would be one of the most hated commanders, because you are going to be singling out a player. I don't want to say people avoid Group Slug because of its reputation, but people definitely do stay away from some commanders if they feel like they had their fun, and with Zancha it does seem to be like a one-trick pony. You just do this to whoever you want to hurt in the game, and that's it. Then you give it to the next player, and then you pay mana, they lose life, you draw cards. And that's about it. Enough to leave a sour taste in most people's mouths. And then number 8, we have Pramacon Sky Rampart, another gimmick here, focusing around the direction of combat. Who's allowed to attack in what direction? You get to choose left or right, and players can only attack with their creatures in that direction. This is surprisingly a fun commander to build around. However, compared to some of the other mechanics that came out at the same time, we're talking about Commander 2019 here. You also had Madness, you had Morph, you had Flashback, you had Populate. Those kind of overshadowed this sort of mechanic. And in a similar way to Zancha, it's also just used to pick on a certain player. You know all of the attention is going to be funneled in that direction. You're doing it on purpose in order to make sure that only certain people are being attacked. So it does kind of wear out its welcome. Still a fun commander. I'm not trying to say any of these are bad commanders or boring commanders. Just ones that I can see falling off the face of the earth because most people had their fun. It was really cool when it first came out, but then most people are over it. And then we have number 7. This is another one I've yet to talk about, but Gishath's Son's Avatar. Now we move on to Tribal. And it's not just any Tribal. Some Tribal decks are more resilient than others, especially if you have a wide variety of commanders to choose from, like with Elves. Or even Vampires, you have a variety of Vampire commander options, even though some are definitely better than others. You only really have one that's pure dinosaur tribal, and that's Gishath's Son's Avatar. It also didn't really help that when Gishath came out, so did all the other dinosaurs. So dinosaurs were pretty much infants at that point in Magic the Gathering. Not a lot to choose from, not a lot of synergy. You might have the Enrage ability, but other than that, you were just in it for the whole novelty of playing dinosaurs in Magic the Gathering, I guess. They're big creatures, they stomp around, If you like that, to each their own, but Gishath definitely had its time. When Ixalan first came out, this was one of the more popular commanders. Not a lot of incentive when compared to some of the newer commanders to go back and replay this one. And then number 6, this one's pretty big. Elisha Who Smiles at Death. Not only is this a commander that sort of just disappeared, but it's not even the first commander that does this. We're talking about Kaalia too. A way to cheat into play a creature like Master of Cruelties. That was the whole purpose of this commander, was that whole gimmick of cheating creatures into play during combat. And while you did cheat stuff into play from the graveyard, it wasn't out of nowhere like with Kaalia. and you also had a limitation on the power of the creature that you can cheat into play. I think that was part of the problem. You just had so many restrictions around what was essentially the dollar store version of a more popular commander. So going back to Fate Reforged, going back to around this time in Magic the Gathering, Elisha was a very popular commander option, even Tiny Leader's popular, but one that just hasn't seen much play since, because I think people, they've been there, they've seen that, their brothers and sisters have played with this kind of commander. We all get it. We understand what you're doing. Number 5 here is Lazav the Multifarious. Now this one's kind of sad because around Guilds of Ravnica, this was supposed to be the new Dimir commander with the new Surveil mechanic. Really sweet. Everyone talked about the Phyrexian Dreadnought combo, making it super easy to deal commander damage with Lazav, but that was it. That's a lot of why commanders just sort of fall off. They're known for like one really cool gimmick, one really cool combo, and then once people realize there's really not much else to do with that commander, they just avoid it. They don't really choose to build around that commander anymore once they see that all the early attention for that commander was just focused around a tiny gimmick, something that was cool if you could pull it off, but in a multiplayer game, it's not very resilient. So taking the cooler idea of the previous Lazav from Gatecrash, where you were able to make it a copy of a creature that entered the graveyard, you had hexproof, and maybe making it a little bit more interactive this time. It was a cool idea, cool concept at first, but like a lot of commanders, once people have had their fun with it, they've explored the different possibilities, they get exhausted real quick. Number 4 is another sad one because I really do like this commander. I like its mechanics. Marcel the Pretender. Very similar to Lazav the Multifarious, I think even more so because so many people were interested in this commander. You had a lot of cool activated abilities from creatures and artifacts, but you sort of have a commander-centric focus deck, where it's just, if your commander's out there, your deck is doing something. If it's not, you can't get anything done. It's very difficult without Marcel out there. And even down to the combos, when most people want a combo, they need something quick, efficient. The combos that you are able to pull off with Marcel are kind of convoluted, and similarly to Lazav, very early on, if you enjoyed the gimmicks, that's really what you were in it for with Marcel, something you couldn't do with another commander. Again, not saying these are bad commanders, not saying that these are boring commanders, it's just once people had their fun with that ability, but they noticed that the commander wasn't very resilient, very easy to disrupt, they started to look elsewhere for their commander options. And then number 3 is a relatively newer commander option from a newer commander product in 2019, Carrick, Son of Yawgmoth. I love mono black in commander, and Carrick makes a fantastic mono black commander option. However, I have to admit the ability is very straightforward, it's very easy to understand, but it doesn't really inspire much creativity. This could be the first and only example of a commander that's on here just because it really doesn't do more than just one thing. It turns your black mana into Phyrexian mana essentially, where you can pay either 2 life or that 1 black for whatever cost on whatever card you have. That's great, that's awesome. It combos. You are able to storm off in those decks using something like an Aetherflux Reservoir, but this is the one trick pony of commanders. If you're not doing that, what exactly are you doing? If you're not fooling around with life gain and being able to one-shot your opponent in this sort of deck, what exactly are you here to do? Are you just losing life just to make your spells cheaper? Because if that's all you're doing and settling for, you're probably going to lose really quickly. And then we have number 2, Gave, Guru of Spores. Talk about one of the most popular commanders that just fell off the face of the earth. I don't see Gave, Guru of Spores decks. I see Gave in some other decks, which I think is definitely worth pointing out, that some of these are actually probably better as one of the 99, especially if we're talking about something like Geshath, if we're talking about something like Zancha Sleeper Agent. Those are cards that could also see play as one of the 99 more so than as a commander. Gave, Guru of Spores has potential as one of the 99, but not so much as a commander because the combos require a bit of a setup, and they're not subtle whatsoever, they're telegraphed. But going back 10 years, this was the kind of commander that people were into, because this is a format where you are going to play doubling season where you haven't before. This is one of the commanders that really helped to popularize that card. But this is all about the combos, being able to use something like an Ashnod's Altar, and then that way you get infinite +1/+1 counters, infinite Saproling tokens, and then you have some way of just dealing a lot of damage in combat, or just having any kind of Blood Artist death trigger win. Very popular because of that, because of how easy that was initially, but now we have so many commanders that don't telegraph their combos like Gave does, and Gave is just slower. Now we move on to number 1 here. Number 1 is Allora Ageless Ascetic. Before Commander 2016, and I would even say maybe before Commander 2015, before Marin of Clan Neltoff, Allora was the most played commander easily. Control became popular in the format. It allowed you to deal with the more combat-heavy decks like Animar and Kalia, and the more popular Voltron strategy, which earlier on Voltron was a pretty efficient way of winning. If you only had to deal 21 commander damage, that was a lot easier to do earlier on, and Allora offered you something unique at the time. You could just sit back and gain a couple life each one of your upkeeps, and then benefit off of that life gain if you choose to do so, or just play Esper Control. Because you have life gain, you don't need to block as often, and you likely have a lot of other supporting life gain just to keep your life total up there. Why Allora has kind of fallen off a bit, the strategy is very simple. It's no longer going to blow your mind when you're gaining 2 life each upkeep. That's actually pretty tame. He does offer you some card draw if you want to get him out there, but other than that, he's not really useful while on the field. This was really just taking advantage of what the format was earlier on. And Allora was just such a mismatch for other decks because you couldn't handle this kind of control and this kind of durdle, because the durdle was real. If you wanted to durdle and just gain life slowly over the course of the game, Allora was your commander and he was a real nightmare. But as always, I mean, these are my 10 picks. It's of course going to be subjective. It's based on observation only. People's observations tend to be different person to person, so let me know your opinions in the comment section below. As always, subscribe, like, comment, share, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. Void here signing off. See you all next time.